the lobby of the Grand Avellini Hotel was always shining. The marble floor reflected golden light from the tall chandeliers, and every guest who walked through the glass doors felt as if they had entered a palace. Expensive perfumes floated in the air, waiters hurried to serve drinks, and the manager stood tall at the desk, wearing his sharp suit like a badge of power. Among all this glitter and noise, no one looked at the maid. Her name was Amara. She wore a plain gray uniform, her dark skin glowing with sweat as she pushed the cleaning cart slowly across the lobby. Her hands were rough from years of scrubbing floors, her back aching from bending over every single day. She moved quietly, almost invisible, as if she was just another piece of furniture in the Grand Hotel. Amara had learned to keep her head down. She smiled politely when guests walked past, but they never smiled back. They didn't even see her. To them, she was only the maid, not a woman with dreams, not a human with a story. This morning had been harder than most. The manager was already in a foul mood. A group of wealthy foreign guests had checked in late last night, demanding special treatment. He had shouted at the reception staff, scolded the kitchen workers, and now his eyes fell on Amara. "Why are you still here?" he barked as she wiped the edges of the glass doors. She lowered her gaze. "Sir, I'm almost finished." "Finished?" His voice rose, sharp and cold. "Look at this floor. Do you think our guests pay thousands to see watermarks and dust? Do you think they came here to watch you waste time?" Amara's hand froze around the cloth. She felt the heat of shame creep up her neck as guests turned their heads. She wanted to explain, wanted to tell him she had been working since dawn, that she had cleaned 10 rooms already before the lobby, that her feet were swollen inside her cheap shoes. But she stayed silent. Silence had kept her job safe for years. The manager stepped closer. "Get out of the lobby. Now. You're disturbing the image of this hotel. Go clean the back rooms, somewhere no one can see you." His words were heavy, echoing through the grand space. Laughter from a group of businessmen near the bar stung her ears. A young woman at the reception gave her a pitying look before quickly turning away. Amara swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight, but no tears came. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Slowly, she placed the cloth back on the cart, pushed it toward the side door, and walked away. Her shoes clicked softly against the polished floor. Each step felt heavier than the last. The air in the lobby grew colder, the lights harsher. For years she had accepted insults, but today, something was different. As she reached the doorway, she paused. Her eyes swept across the lobby, the golden chandeliers, the expensive suits, the polished smiles of people who thought they owned the world. She looked at the manager, already busy flattering a guest as if nothing had happened. And then, very slowly, Amara turned her head back toward the heart of the lobby. For the first time, her gaze was not humble. It was sharp. Cold. Almost dangerous. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Inside her mind, words were forming. One day, this place will not belong to them. It will belong to me. She left the lobby quietly, but her silence was no longer weakness. It was a storm waiting behind closed doors. Amara walked down the narrow service corridor, away from the golden light of the hotel's entrance. The smell changed here. No perfume, no flowers. Only the faint scent of bleach, damp mops, and old pipes. Workers passed her, carrying trays, linens, heavy bags. Some nodded politely, but most were too busy to notice her mood. She reached the storage room and sat on a wooden crate. For a moment, she let out a long breath, as if she had been holding it for years. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something stronger, anger mixed with determination. In the stillness of the room, memories rushed back. She remembered her younger self sitting in a classroom, raising her hand with confidence, solving problems faster than anyone else. She remembered the dream she once spoke aloud: "One day, I will run a business. I will lead people." Life had not been kind. Tragedies, debts, betrayals all had forced her into this gray uniform. But inside, the fire never went out. Today, the manager's humiliation had poured fuel on that fire. She opened her small handbag and pulled out a worn notebook. Its pages were filled with handwriting, numbers, ideas, sketches of business plans. On the first page, circled many times in black ink, was a single word, hotel. Her fingers brushed over the word gently, almost like a vow. Outside, the lobby continued to shine without her. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, music played. They thought the maid was gone, forgotten. But Amara was not gone. She was only beginning. And when she came back, the entire hotel would remember her name. The night was quiet inside the service quarters of the Grand Avellini Hotel. Most workers had already gone home, leaving only a few lights burning in the long corridors. Amara sat on a narrow bed in her small staff room. The space was no bigger than a storage closet, bare walls, one chair, and a thin blanket that could barely keep the cold away. On her lap lay the same notebook she had carried for years. Its corners were bent, the cover faded, but inside, every page carried pieces of her heart. She ran her fingers over the words and numbers, and slowly, memories of another life rose before her eyes. There was a time when Amara was not invisible. She was young, sitting in a bright classroom, raising her hand eagerly to answer every question. Her teachers admired her quick mind. She dreamed of studying business, of starting her own company. She imagined tall glass buildings with her name at the top, imagined herself walking into offices where people stood up in respect. Her father had once told her, "Amara, you were born to lead. Never forget that." But dreams were fragile things. When her father passed away suddenly, her family's small savings disappeared in medical bills. Her mother tried to keep the household together, but soon, debts began piling up. Amara had to drop out of her studies and take whatever job she could find. First, she worked in small shops, then in a restaurant kitchen, and finally, inside the glittering walls of the Grand Avellini Hotel as a maid. The uniform stripped her identity. Guests never asked her name. Managers treated her like a replaceable tool. But Amara never stopped observing. While her hands scrubbed floors, her eyes watched everything: the flow of money, the careless mistakes of the management, the way guests complained about services that could be improved. She learned silently, gathering knowledge like pieces of gold. Now, as she sat in her room, the hotel felt less like her workplace and more like her classroom. Every insult from the manager had been a lesson. Every demand from a guest was a clue. Every late-night cleaning had given her time to study the hidden cracks of the empire she served. And she knew something the owners tried to hide: the Grand Avellini was not as strong as it looked. The staff whispered in corners when they thought no one was listening. The hotel was in debt. The owners had taken risky loans to keep the luxury image alive. Suppliers were complaining of late payments. There were rumors of investors pulling back. Amara listened carefully. She connected the pieces. And she wrote them all down in her notebook. The next day, as the sun spilled into the grand lobby, Amara returned to her work. Her face carried no trace of last night's humiliation. She moved quietly, pushing her cart, polishing tables, arranging flowers. But behind her calm eyes, her mind was sharper than ever. Some workers noticed the difference. "Have you seen her lately?" whispered Maria, a waitress, as she passed a tray of drinks. "She walks like she knows something we don't." "Don't be silly," replied another worker. "She's just a maid. Always will be." Yet, not everyone agreed. An older doorman, who had been with the hotel for 30 years, watched Amara carefully. He saw the way she studied people, the way she wrote notes during her breaks, the way her eyes seemed to measure every corner of the building. "She's not like the others," he muttered to himself. "There's something in her." That afternoon, fate gave Amara a chance. A wealthy guest was arguing with the front desk clerk. His room was not ready, and the manager was nowhere to be found. The guest's voice grew louder, angry enough that other guests began to turn their heads. Amara stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. "May I help?" The clerk looked shocked. "Amara." But the guest turned to her, desperate for someone to fix his problem. Within minutes, Amara had arranged a temporary lounge, organized complimentary drinks, and called housekeeping to prepare the room faster. She spoke calmly, with authority that surprised even herself. By the time the manager returned, the crisis was already over. The guest shook her hand. "Thank you. You saved my time." The clerk stared at her in disbelief. Workers whispered later, "Did you see how she handled that? Better than the manager himself." The manager, of course, was furious. He pulled Amara aside. "Stay in your place. You're here to clean, not to think." But Amara only bowed her head. She didn't argue. Inside, she smiled. Because she knew what he didn't, her time was coming. That evening, when she returned to her room, she opened her notebook again. On a fresh page, she wrote, "Step 1, prove my worth where they cannot." She underlined the words twice. For years, she had been forced to bow, to stay silent, to hide her true self. But every insult, every dismissal had only made her stronger. She was not simply a maid. She was a student of power, watching from the shadows. The whispers about her had already begun to spread through the hotel staff. Some thought she was strange, others admired her. Nobody knew her full story, but everyone felt something was changing. And Amara, sitting alone in her tiny room, closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost see it, the grand lobby, not as a place where she was thrown out, but as a place where she stood tall, giving orders, owning every corner. When she opened her eyes, there was a fire in them. One day soon, the world would no longer whisper about her. They would speak her name loudly, in awe, in respect, in fear. And it would begin here, inside the very hotel that once humiliated her. Another step closer. A regular guest, a businessman from overseas, called her while she was arranging flowers in the lobby. "You," he said, pointing. "You helped me last month when the staff couldn't. I need advice again. Can you?" Amara hesitated. The manager stood only a few steps away, his ears sharp like knives. But the businessman insisted. He explained a problem with the hotel's service system. Amara listened carefully, nodding. Then she spoke softly but with clear authority. If the hotel created a faster check-in counter only for long-term guests, it would save hours of waiting. People like you would not lose valuable time. The businessman blinked. "That's clever." He looked impressed. "Why are you not a manager?" Amara smiled faintly. "Not my time yet, sir." When he left, the manager glared at her, his face red with fury. But there was nothing he could do, the guest had asked for her help. That night, in her small room, Amara opened her notebook again. She wrote, "Step 2, show my strength in front of those who matter." She underlined the words twice. The hotel's cracks were widening. Guests were complaining more often. The owners were trying to hide the debts. The staff were tired of being treated like dirt. Amara saw it all, and in her notebook, she mapped out solutions the real managers could not see. She was no longer just observing. She was preparing. Days passed. Each time a crisis came, Amara was there, not loud, not demanding attention, but effective. When the air conditioning failed on the top floor, she guided the workers to fix it faster than the engineers. When a wedding party complained about decorations, she offered ideas that delighted them. Slowly, quietly, her reputation grew. The guests began asking for her. "Where's the maid who helped me last time?" "Call Amara, she'll fix it." The manager's anger boiled. To him, every compliment for Amara was an insult to his authority. But he couldn't fire her, not when the guests themselves requested her presence. Still, he hissed in her ear one morning, "Don't think you're important. This hotel belongs to people with power, not little workers like you." Amara only smiled politely. "Of course, sir." But inside, her thoughts were sharp as knives. Power is not given. Power is taken. One rainy night, as thunder rolled outside, Amara sat in her room, the notebook open before her. She turned to a fresh page and wrote in bold letters, "Step 3, take the hotel." Her hands did not shake as she wrote it. She had been saving small amounts of money for years. She had connections outside the hotel, old friends, former classmates who respected her mind. She knew the debts choking the hotel, knew the investors who were restless. All she had to do was move at the right moment. The manager thought she was just a maid. The owners thought she was invisible. But Amara had been building a vision piece by piece. And now, the pieces were almost ready. She closed her notebook and looked at the ceiling, listening to the storm. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Soon, the world would see. The next morning, she walked through the lobby with quiet grace. Guests passed her, staff hurried around her, and the manager glared at her. But she walked as if she owned the very floor beneath her feet. And perhaps, in some way, she already did. Because deep inside her heart, Amara had already made the call. The first call to begin the takeover. The morning began like any other in the Grand Avellini Hotel. The chandeliers glowed warmly, the marble floors shone, and the smell of coffee and perfume mixed in the air. Guests moved in and out with luggage rolling behind them. To everyone else, it was just another day. But for Amara, today was not ordinary. Today was the day she walked into the lobby not as a maid, but as something else. She had spent weeks making quiet moves. She had called investors who remembered her brilliance from university. She had spoken with small business owners, suppliers, even bankers who were unhappy with the hotel's late payments. One by one, she gathered allies. One by one, the pieces of her plan fit together. And now, she held documents in her bag, papers that gave her control over debts, contracts, and partnerships. She had arranged it so carefully that the owners had no idea how much ground they had already lost. Her footsteps echoed as she entered the lobby. The gray maid's uniform was gone. Instead, she wore a sharp black suit. Her hair was tied neatly, her shoulders squared. She looked powerful, confident, untouchable. The staff stopped what they were doing. Trays froze mid-air, whispers filled the hall. "Is that Amara?" Maria gasped. "No, it can't be. Look at her. She's different." Even the old doorman straightened with pride. "I told you," he whispered. "I told you she was not ordinary." The manager spotted her and stormed forward, his face twisting with anger. "What is this?" he hissed. "You think wearing a suit makes you someone? You don't belong here, maid. Get out before I call security." But Amara did not flinch. She simply reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She placed it calmly on the reception desk, in front of him. "These are contracts," she said in a clear, steady voice. "I've acquired the hotel's largest debts. I've secured backing from investors. As of this morning, the Grand Avellini no longer belongs to you or the owners you serve." The manager blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Around them, the staff leaned in, the guests paused mid-step, the entire lobby frozen in shock. Amara's voice grew firmer. "This lobby, where you once forced me out, now belongs to me. I am no longer the maid you can shout at. I am the owner standing before you." Gasps rippled across the hall. Some staff covered their mouths, others stared wide-eyed. The manager turned red. "This is a joke," he spat. "A ridiculous performance. A maid buying a hotel? Do you all believe this nonsense?" But Amara only smiled. She lifted another paper from the folder, an official ownership certificate, signed and sealed. She held it high enough for everyone to see. "This is not a performance. It's reality. As of today, I hold majority ownership of the Grand Avellini Hotel." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum more quietly. The manager's voice cracked as he shouted, "Impossible. You don't have the money, you don't have the connections." Amara's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp as steel. "You underestimated me. You thought I was invisible. But I was learning every step, watching every weakness. While you looked down on me, I was climbing above you." The staff erupted in whispers. "She owns the hotel?"
A maid, the owner? She's been planning this all along.
The old doorman's eyes gleamed with pride. Respect her, he muttered.
She's earned it.
The manager shook with rage. He tried to grab the papers, but Amara stepped back. Two suited men, her new investors, entered through the doors and stood beside her like guards. Touch those documents, one warned, and you'll answer to the law. The manager's face drained of color.
Amara turned to the staff.
Her voice was calm, yet it carried through every corner of the grand lobby. For years, you were treated as if you were nothing. But from this day forward, things will change.
This hotel will not be built on humiliation and fear.
It will be built on respect. Her words struck deep. Some workers felt tears burn in their eyes. Maria, the waitress, whispered, "She's one of us, and now she leads us." The manager stumbled back, his pride crumbling.
You can't do this.
You don't have the experience to run this place. You'll destroy everything. Amara stepped closer, her eyes cold. You've already been destroying it, with arrogance, with ignorance. I will not destroy the hotel.
I will rebuild it.
She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear.
Step aside. The lobby is mine now. The man's shoulders sagged.
For the first time, he had no words. The guests, who had been watching in silence, began to clap. At first one, then two, then the entire hall filled with applause.
Some clapped politely, others with genuine admiration.
To them, it was like watching a story from a book come to life, a maid rising to power in the very place she was once humiliated. Amara stood tall, the sound of clapping echoing around her. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm, almost regal. Inside, she thought of her father's words, "You were born to lead." And at last, she had proven him right.
That night, the manager sat alone in his office, defeated.
His reign of cruelty was over. The hotel's future no longer belonged to him.
But in the grand office upstairs, Amara looked out over the city lights.
She placed her notebook, the same worn notebook, on the desk before her. She turned to the last page and wrote a single sentence.
Step 4, the throne is mine.
And with that, she leaned back in the chair that once belonged to her enemies.
The lobby, the hotel, the empire, it was all hers now.
But deep inside, she knew, this was only the beginning.
The morning after Amara's declaration, the Grand Avellini Hotel did not feel the same.
The walls were the same, the chandeliers still glowed, and the marble floors still shone, but the air carried something new. A quiet electricity moved through the corridors, a sense that the world had shifted overnight. For years, the staff had walked with bowed heads, moving like shadows. But today, they lifted their eyes a little higher. They whispered to one another with excitement, with disbelief, with hope.
She really owns it now?
It's true. She showed the papers.
A maid, the owner. Can you imagine?
Amara had not just taken over a building, she had shaken the soul of everyone inside it. In the grand office at the top floor, Amara sat behind the desk that once belonged to the arrogant manager. The chair was large, made of leather, but she sat in it as if it had always been waiting for her. On the desk lay her old notebook, its pages worn and creased. Next to it were the official documents of ownership, signed and sealed. Her eyes moved from the notebook to the window, where the city stretched endlessly before her. 1,000 lights blinked in the distance, each one a reminder that she was no longer invisible.
Yet power was not enough.
Now, she had to lead. She called the staff together that afternoon. From the waiters to the cooks, from the cleaners to the reception clerks, they all gathered nervously in the lobby. No one knew what to expect.
Would she fire them? Would she act like the owners before her? When Amara appeared at the top of the staircase, silence fell.
She was dressed simply, yet her presence filled the room. She spoke clearly, her voice strong but warm. For years, this hotel stood on the backs of people who were never respected. You worked long hours, endured insults, and were treated as if you were nothing.
I know this pain because I lived it with you. I was one of you.
A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others looked at her with wide eyes. But from this day forward, Amara continued, things will change.
This hotel will not run on fear. It will run on fairness. Everyone here will be treated with dignity.
The guests may pay for luxury, but it is you who build it.
And you will be honored for that. Tears shimmered in Maria's eyes.
The old doorman straightened his back with pride. Even the cooks in their stained aprons clapped softly, the sound growing until the whole lobby echoed with applause.
Amara raised her hand.
Now, let's rebuild this place together.
Her first changes were bold.
The staff were given fair wages. Breaks were respected.
No more shouting, no more humiliation. She created training programs so every worker could grow, not just serve. Guests noticed the difference quickly.
The waiters smiled more, the cleaners worked with pride, the clerks handled problems with confidence. The air of fear had been replaced with quiet strength. And with that change, the hotel began to shine brighter than ever.
But not everyone was happy. The old owners, shocked by their loss, tried to fight back.
They sent lawyers, made threats, claimed Amara had tricked them. But the contracts were ironclad, the investors stood with her, and the staff refused to betray her. The enemies who once thought her powerless now found themselves powerless against her.
The former manager, stripped of his authority, came once to beg for his position back.
I know this hotel better than anyone, he argued.
You need me.
Amara looked at him calmly. The only thing I need is to ensure no one here suffers what I suffered under you.
Leave, and never return.
His face burned with shame as he walked out of the lobby he once ruled. The staff watched silently, none lifting a hand to defend him. For the first time, justice had come.
Weeks passed, and the Grand Avellini's reputation spread. Guests told stories not just of luxury but of kindness.
They spoke of a hotel where workers smiled with genuine warmth, where the service was sharper and faster than anywhere else, where the air itself felt different, lighter, freer.
New investors came forward, offering partnerships.
Reporters wrote about the maid who became the queen of the hotel. Her story inspired others, especially workers across the city who had long felt trapped in silence.
And every night, when the lights dimmed and the guests slept, Amara returned to her notebook.
She turned its worn pages and wrote new steps.
Step 5: build not just a hotel, but a legacy. She underlined it once.
One evening, she walked through the lobby alone. The chandeliers glowed softly, the marble floors reflected her figure, and the air smelled of fresh flowers. She stopped in the very spot where, weeks ago, she had been ordered out like she was nothing. Her heart ached with memory, but this time it was not pain, it was triumph. She whispered to herself, "You tried to erase me from here.
Now I stand at the center."
A guest passing by smiled politely at her, not knowing her story, only seeing a confident woman who clearly belonged.
Amara smiled back, her eyes fierce but kind.
This lobby was no longer a place of humiliation. It was the throne room of her empire.
Yet deep inside, Amara knew the journey was not over.
The hotel was only the beginning. Because the woman they had once pushed aside was no longer just a maid, or even just an owner. She was becoming something far greater. And the world beyond the Grand Avellini would soon know her name.
The Grand Avellini Hotel no longer looked the same.
The walls were still marble, the chandeliers still gold, but the spirit of the place had transformed. It was no longer a palace of arrogance where workers bent their heads in fear. It had become something living, breathing, filled with dignity and pride.
And at the center of it all stood Amara.
Months had passed since the takeover.
The hotel thrived like never before. Guests spoke of warmth and excellence, not just wealth.
Staff walked with their heads high, knowing their work mattered. Every person, from the cleaner to the chef, felt seen. The newspapers called her the queen of the hotel.
Some wrote about her story with amazement, once a maid, now an empire builder.
Others doubted her future, whispering that she would fail like so many dreamers before her.
But Amara did not listen to the noise.
She listened only to the sound of progress, the footsteps of workers moving with confidence, the laughter of satisfied guests, the quiet beating of her own determined heart. One evening, she called a meeting in the grand lobby. The chandeliers glowed warmly, casting golden light across the staff gathered below. Everyone was there: reception clerks, cooks, cleaners, waiters, guards. Amara stood at the top of the staircase, looking down at them not with distance, but with belonging. "I stood here once as a maid," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "I was told I didn't belong. I was forced out in shame. But look around us now. This hotel is not built by chandeliers or marble. It is built by people, by you. You are the true heart of this place." The staff clapped, some with tears in their eyes. She raised her hand. "From this day forward, the Grand Avellini will not only serve guests with luxury. It will stand as proof that no one should ever be silenced, no one should ever be forgotten. Respect is the foundation of this house." The applause grew louder, filling the hall like thunder. For the workers, it was not just words, it was truth, lived every day since Amara had taken charge. Later that night, Amara walked alone through the quiet lobby. The flowers were fresh, the marble floor shining, the chandeliers humming softly. She stopped at the exact place where she had once been humiliated. She closed her eyes for a moment. The memory of the manager's cruel voice echoed faintly, "Get out of the lobby." But when she opened her eyes, all she saw was light, all she felt was power. "This lobby is mine now," she whispered. "And it always will be." Her story spread far beyond the walls of the hotel. Workers from other businesses came to see her, to learn from her, to ask how she had risen from silence to strength. Young women from poor neighborhoods wrote her letters, saying she gave them hope. One letter read, "They laughed when I said I wanted more. But when I read about you, I believed again." Amara kept every letter in a box inside her office. On nights when the weight of leadership pressed heavy on her shoulders, she opened the box and read them, reminding herself why she fought. She was no longer just leading a hotel. She was leading a movement. But power did not change her heart. She still visited the kitchen to thank the cooks. She still spoke kindly to the cleaners. Sometimes, she even picked up a cloth and polished the tables herself, reminding everyone that no work was beneath her. This humility made her stronger, not weaker. It made the staff trust her, love her, and follow her not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Guests noticed this as well. "There is something different here," one businessman said. "It's not just the luxury. It's the spirit. You can feel it the moment you walk in." One afternoon, Amara sat in her grand office, her notebook open before her. The same worn notebook that had once been her only weapon. She flipped through its pages: old plans, old dreams, and smiled. Almost everything she had written had come true. On the last page, she wrote slowly, carefully. Step 6: Inspire others to rise. She underlined it 3 times. Because Amara knew her journey was not only about herself. It was about every person who had been told they were nothing. Every worker forced into silence. Every dreamer laughed at and forgotten. She wanted them all to see her story and believe, if she could rise, so could they. That night, the lobby was quiet again. Only the soft glow of lights remained. Amara stood in the center, her reflection shining on the marble floor. She looked around at the space that had once been her prison, and now was her kingdom. Her eyes softened. She thought of her father's voice, "You were born to lead." She smiled. "Yes, father," she whispered. "I was." She raised her head high, her shoulders straight, and walked slowly across the grand lobby, no longer a maid, no longer invisible, but the queen of the empire she had built with her own hands. And with each step, the silence of the hotel carried a promise. The world would never forget her name again.